Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, June the 5th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we are priding ourselves as a news podcast, which means that we only take from the most reputable sources with award-winning journalism. We don't do sensationalist news like Fox News or Newsmax or News Media or The Beast or whatever Ben Shapiro runs. Pretty much whatever extreme left or extreme right views you usually watch, you won't find here. We give you facts and nothing but the facts. We do try to watch our language. But let's be honest, sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense or graphic for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So I know, because when I first thought about how we're going to start this show, I really just, let's just say I didn't see this coming. But again, if you've been under a rock, 9 times out of 10, you've already heard this story.
And much of the world, the unprecedented conviction of a former president.
For the first time in American history.
We really do need a new word for unprecedented.
Former President Trump vows to appeal his historic guilty conviction.
A presidential candidate found guilty on 34 counts is clearly unlike anything we've ever seen.
Trump's conviction is a first, a clean sweep, guilty on all 34 counts, an especially strong vindication of the New York DA's case. And it is one that all news viewers and citizens and people around the world are actually hearing and absorbing as one fact. People can have different reactions to this legal fact, but unlike so many other civic and political feuds that devolved into competing claims almost from the start, there's only one legal outcome here, an outcome that is sinking in, no matter what one's views of the defendant are, and no matter where you get your information from, your phone or the internet or newspapers or TV news, where May 30th, 2024 played out with the same big verdict news, no matter which station you watch. To that end, as we begin this new week, tonight we're going to do something a little different. We're going to air how this news broke across different channels. And I'll tell you up front, the focus here is not to promote other channels or just re-air our own, but rather with an attempted independent mindset to just see together for a few moments how this broke for the many millions of Americans watching across the different channels. So right now, first, here's how the verdict news broke on Fox and CNN.
There are guilty verdicts from our producer inside. We're hearing guilty on 1 through 5. 1 through 12, we have now 13, 14 guilty. 15 guilty. We're up to 18 counts, 19 guilty. Remember, we have 34 here, 20 guilty. We are now 24 counts in, all guilty from inside. This is what we are hearing from our producers, up to 26 guilty.
Count 27, guilty, another felony charge, falsifying business records in the first degree. Count 28, guilty, another felony charge, falsifying business records in the first degree. Count 29, guilty, felony charge, falsifying business records in the first degree. Count 30, guilty, felony charge, falsifying business records. Count 31, guilty, falsifying business records in the first degree. Count 32, guilty, falsifying business records in the first degree. Only 2 counts left. Count 33, former President Donald Trump found guilty, falsifying business records. Count 34.
Guilty. And that was big news. At MSNBC, we had our teams working together at the courthouse and in our newsroom. And during the jury deliberations, there was no way to know if there would be a hung jury, no agreement, or whether they'd hit a unanimous verdict. So when the jury said it had a verdict, which was just moments before its scheduled adjournment on Thursday, that changed everything. Everything went into motion, but of course, still no one knew what they had decided yet. So as the jury foreperson spoke in real time, we were still waiting to learn. It could have been 34 not guilties. It could have been a split, depending on the counts. Some involved Trump's own signature, for example. Others had documents that he did not himself create. So you could have had guilty on some and not guilty on other counts. Unlike other breaking news where reporters first confirm a fact and then go share it, we were all getting that same new information and those facts in real time. We just aired that moment from CNN and Fox. Now, here tonight is how that news broke on MSNBC.
We've got a verdict. Ari Melber.
We are looking at count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty. Count 4, guilty. Count 5, guilty. Those are the first 5 counts coming out of this jury.
So I'm just going to stop it right there because, again, it gets funnier. And I say it gets funnier because, well, number one, we did not expect the jury to come back. I mean, after a day. The jury came back after a day and said, all 34 counts, this man is guilty of. All 34. And it is amazing to me that all 34 counts, and I thought he would get at least. Now, I'm not going to lie. Just like journalists, just like the journalists have said, we weren't sure if they're going to come back and say not guilty or guilty of all things. But certainly we were not in full confidence that he could slip through this, considering the fact that this is a state case, considering the fact that this is about his business holdings, that he's basically been, screwing over his business. He's been cooking the books. For more than a decade, he's been cooking the books. And if his last tax return, which, again, the New York Times got so long ago, said that he had written off nearly $1 billion worth of losses, again, that should have been a flaming red flag right there. But who knew that Trump, former president, now a convicted felon, we haven't had this much trauma. We haven't had this much drama surrounding a president since Nixon. At the same time, guys, there, and I got to point this out because we have to go to the other side for a little bit. What I mean by the other side is, Fox still trying to pretend to be a news station. Megyn Kelly still trying to pretend to be a journalist. Well, again, they kind of reacted differently when they got the news.
The evil forces that are destroying this republic.
It's a sad day for our justice system, the best justice system ever created by man, the foundation of our constitutional republic. It's literally dying before your eyes.
So are we going to establish a precedent where the president can put his political opponent in jail? It's the type of power we usually see dictators exercise in China and Cuba and North Korea.
So again, that's, unfortunately, that was Jesse Walters, Laura Ingraham, and Sean Hannity. I'm surprised that Tucker Carlson didn't somehow sneak his way in there from the dark side of Twitter. But again, it's amazing to me. And I pointed this out on my Facebook post a long time ago where I sat there. Well, I won't say a long time ago. It was like a little over a week ago. I had sat there and I had said, it is amazing to me that I compared the biblical story of Moses coming down from the mountain with the first tablet ever created, 10 commandments on one side, and the whole story of, the people that he rescued from Egypt, all worshiping a golden calf. And I sat there and said in my Facebook post, I said, imagine you're Moses coming down from the mountain with the tablets in your hand, looking at a whole bunch of people worshiping a golden calf and wondering how dumb they can be. Well, replace the golden calf with Trump. If you're laughing, you get it. If you're offended, you're one of those people. And it amazes me because this is the right. The right has to come out and defend their golden calf. They had to come out and say, oh, this is an injustice, even though the injustice was Trump appointed. Oh, this is terrible, only because Trump was guilty. Because if Trump was not guilty, oh, how they would sit there and say the American justice system prevailed. They'll sit there and say that our president came out of this unscathed. He'd be sitting there saying, I told you guys this is a witch hunt. I told you it was rigged. Oh, they'd be shouting out from the high heavens. But what do we get now? Megyn Kelly, white woman tears.
is ridiculous. What a sad day. The country's been disgraced. That's what's happened. Alvin Bragg and this judge have disgraced the country. We made it, almost 250 years without doing this. And now, because of falsified business records, we've convicted as a felon a former president of the United States. You don't think we could have done something like this to Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton or others? We had a standard. We didn't do this in America. We aren't a banana republic, or at least we didn't used to be. And don't forget what's happened in this Trump case, in which he's now been found guilty of all 34 counts against him, which was overcharged to begin with. It shouldn't have been a case at all. And once charged, it should have been one count. The whole case boils down to the same alleged scheme, but they stretched it into 34 counts by saying, and that check, and that check, and that check, and that invoice, and that invoice. It was all part of your scheme. So now he looks like Al Capone, convicted on these 34 counts. But the idea all along was to stop him from becoming president again. That's the idea behind this prosecution. That is the idea behind Letitia James bankrupting his company that he built, and along with his dad, from the ground up in New York, the city that just turned on him. That was the idea behind E. Jean Carroll and her sexual assault case brought 30 years after the fact, alleging a sexual assault / rape in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room, a case she couldn't even remember the year of the alleged rape in. And that's the idea behind Fannie Willis and Jack Smith ×2. Stop it.
So I'm just going to stop it right there because it's Megyn Kelly, former prosecutor that apparently has forgotten how the law works. This is what the right is doing, ladies and gentlemen. They are literally losing, forgive me for lack of better words, they're losing their shit. Because they really are, because it is, we have to defend Trump. What we got to do? Oh, we're going to bash the prosecution. Poor Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg wanted to make his case off this. No, Alvin Bragg is simply following the letter of the law. Letitia James is following the letter of the law. Georgia DA Fannie Willis, who probably at this moment can't wait to get her trial started. Keep in mind, this between Fannie Willis and her prosecutors, to which Trump prosecutors tried to argue that there was indiscretion in use of funds, to where the judge in that case sat there and said, I can't prove it. There's not enough. However, there's something there. So to appease everybody, either you resign, the DA, Miss Willis, or her prosecutor resigns. The prosecutor resign. Because if you don't think for 1 second, DA Fannie Willis is not chomping at the bit to get her trial started, because that trial involves election tampering. That trial, which again, I know for a lot of people are saying, well, he's a felon, so he can't run for office, right? Unfortunately, here's the thing. I find this amazing, because if you're a felon, in some states you can't vote. In some states, in a lot of states, you can't own a firearm. In some states, you may find it hard to find a job, but you can still run for president. As long as you're not a murderer or a terrorist, you can run for president being a felon. So, and a lot of people are saying, well, what was the whole point about these cases? Because two of the cases that we're paying attention to, because yes, he could have found himself guilty in sexual abuse and assault and be labeled as a predator, still could run for office. He can lose this case, into which now that he's been caught cooking the books and he's found guilty, and of course he'll try to appeal it, but again, good luck. He's still a convicted felon. Still doesn't prevent him from running. However, let's just say the Georgia election tampering case with DA Fannie Willis goes on. Let's say that she wins that case and the former president is found guilty of election tampering. that could disqualify him. Why? Because that could invoke the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, to which you're basically trying to overthrow the country as an insurrectionist, that qualifies. That could do it. Or the document case he has with the FBI, where he kept a storage case full of documents he wasn't supposed to have as president. Because, the president just can't declassify things. That's not how the presidency works. Let's just say the FBI wins that case. He could be labeled an enemy of the state. Again, 14th Amendment. So there is a reason why we are following these cases. Two of the major ones can do it. But it is amazing to me that when you talk about the right-hand side, oh, Alvin Bragg was out to get him. Letitia James is out to get him. It's amazing that everybody on the side of justice is out to get somebody who literally is Al Capone nearly 80 years later. Because, Al Capone didn't go down for the multiple alleged murders, for the alleged, killings and things of that nature. History lesson, kids. Al Capone went down for tax evasion. The IRS is what got Al Capone, not the FBI. So it's amazing they're talking about Trump, because Trump, well, usually they always say, well, he's Teflon Don because, nothing sticks to him. And yet, him cooking the books for so long has finally caught up to him. And again, the right wing, Fox News, the Daily Wire, the Daily Beast, they're all doing their jobs right now. America's favorite Uncle Tom, Tim Scott, they're all doing the job right now. This is a travesty. This is a sham. What happened to the American justice system? For once, it worked. For once, justice did prevail. Outside this little thing called evidence, how else do you sit there and say, well, that wasn't supposed to happen? Well, yes, it was supposed to happen because Trump got caught. And let me tell you something else. His bond case with Letitia James, to which she won that judgment, although at Knight Securities, that's looking like it's full of Swiss cheese. And if that bond goes away, the previous default judgment goes into place. And unless Trump has $400 some odd million, Trump Tower is looking real seizable right now. And don't tell me and don't think for 1 second that Letitia James is looking at that. But my money is on Fani Willis. Fani Willis, DA Fani Willis, who is currently sitting in Georgia right now, has to go through the BS of another appeal from the Trump prosecutors saying that, well, no, we appealed that decision because even though the Trump prosecutors, for lack of better words, got their asses handed to them by a DA in the witness stand to tell you that Fani Willis did not come to play. And I can only imagine when that Georgia case goes into play, you gonna sit there and tell me she's not ready to nail that man? Oh, she ready. And I cannot wait to watch it. But speaking of Trump, because again, even though his mouthpieces are out there doing the work, after the trial, of course, he said his greatest hits.
Everything they wanted. It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that.
President Biden also reacted earlier today publicly to the verdict for the first time, firing back at Trump over his baseless claims that the trial was rigged.
That's how the American system of justice works.
Well, in that case, yeah. But I just love how Trump just sat there. Well, it was rigged. We want a different venue. The crime happened in New York. You were a New Yorker for years. You wanted your case to be in Florida. That wasn't going to happen. You said the judge was conflicted. The judge refused to recuse themselves because they had no basis for accusal. You just didn't like the judge. And who are you going to be mad at? The jury? The jury to which your defense team and the prosecutors agreed on. So that jury of, I believe that jury of 7 women, 5 men, 12 people all sat there and pretty much gave their listened to your testimony and bullshit. And then you got mad and sat there and said, well, the whole thing was rigged. Really? Was the evidence rigged? Was the evidence of you shortchanging or ballooning your properties to get loans from banks, was that rigged? Because that's fraud. Hence why we're all here, to prove that you are nothing more than a con artist, a fraudulent politician. But you know what? As messed up as that is, there is some good news from Trump. Why? Because his campaign fundraising. Let me stress this very carefully. We just got the verdict less than a couple of days ago. Okay? They just reported from NBC News that during the first 24 hours after the verdict, that through various fundraising PACs and even through the Trump Foundation, they raised nearly $53 million. This was 24 hours after the verdict, that idiots, and I say idiots with an I, donated $53 million to his campaign after the verdict. There's just no words. There's no words for that kind of stupidity. But it's stupidity we cannot ignore, because again, the race is going to be it. It's going to be Trump and Biden, and they are going to eventually have their debates. And I'm sorry, Trump can't debate anything because he doesn't have a leg to stand on. That also being said, however, to think that man is a convicted felon, and after 24 hours after his verdict, $53 million is newly raised. That just goes to show you that a lot of people who are not corporations or not rich people, who are disillusioned, highly ill-educated, and probably watch Fox News the same way most of us watch sports, will just, they are so tuned in because, again, for a lot of people, Trump is their wet dream. Trump is their dream of a man that portrays that he has it all and can do everything he wants without consequence. Let's be honest, for a lot of white folks out there, that is their American dream. And the fact that he's going to sit there and say, well, if I'm not president, there's going to be a bloodbath. He is basically a con man who loves the idea, romanticizes the idea of being a dictator, but now he's got enough people behind him that it's damn near considered a cult, if not a terrorist group. But hey, he's a convicted felon for now. No matter how you cut the mustard, you have to say convicted former president Donald Dorito Trump. And I said before, I can't wait for the Georgia case. That's going to be fun. But, with the GOP, taking this hit, and they've all sat there and, all aired out their grievances, you think the GOP would be doing something great, like still trying to help the American people, still trying to get the economy back on track, to really, change some things. You would think so, right? Nope. We're too busy grilling the guy who was handling the COVID situation the best he can. And trust me, if you're wondering if it's that dumb, yes, it's that dumb.
Tonight, Dr. Anthony Fauci in the hot seat.
You belong in prison.
I am so sorry that you are subjected to those level of attacks.
House Republicans pressing the former face of America's pandemic response on past COVID restrictions, including that rule Americans should stay 6 feet apart.
Wearing a mask, maintaining 6 feet of distance.
Fauci told the committee behind closed doors that 6-foot rule sort of just appeared. Today, clarifying he meant there were no clinical trials done.
Do you think that a rule that sort of just appeared is substantial justification for the regulations that we saw based on that 6-foot rule?
When saying it just appeared, it came from the CDC.
And you didn't feel an obligation as the lead scientist at the NIH to challenge that?
I've challenged the CDC multiple times.
Publicly, you challenged them on the 6-foot distancing rule?
It is not appropriate to be publicly challenging a sister organization.
Republicans also pressing him on COVID's origins. Fauci denying he downplayed the possibility of a leak from the Wuhan lab in China.
Do you agree that there was a push to downplay the lab leak theory?
Not on my part.
Really?
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
I think most of the country would find that amazing.
But look at the facts. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
Fauci emotional talking about the threats he and his family still face.
It is very troublesome to me. It is much more troublesome because they've involved my wife and my 3 daughters.
That hearing underscoring time hasn't healed those political wounds. Meanwhile, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo set to testify next.
So it's amazing to me. And again, this is all GOP. That the GOP decided that, yes, we need to grill the former head of the coronavirus pandemic. Keep in mind, Dr. Fauci has done an exceptional job. Number one, heading up a virus that we knew very little about, being transparent, taking precautions, at the same time still trying to give as much information to a very concerned public as humanly possible. And yet he has to go into a room full of GOP idiots, starting off with, bad butch built blonde Barbie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says Mr. Fauci and disrespects the guy. I'll be honest with you. If you went to medical school and did a residency and, jumped through all these hoops, you didn't jump through all these hoops just to be called Mr. or Mrs. or whatever you prefer. It should be doctor. You earned that title. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, who hasn't earned anything, I had to stop myself. I was going to say she hasn't earned anything that wasn't off her back or knees, but too late now, I've already said it. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, who hasn't earned anything in her life, is going to disrespect a research doctor who has did his best at a time where information was coming as best as humanly possible, and try to say, you know what, you should be in jail, you should be this, for what? Well, because the 6-foot rule really didn't do anything. Again, are you a doctor? Are you a research scientist? Are you working in virology? So here's this thing. He sat there and said, because it was taken out of context, about the 6-foot rule. Because if you've ever been in a hospital, they institute all social distancing policies all the time too, especially in their infectious units. There's distancing there. There's hazardous materials there, protective clothing there. So again, that's in a hospital. So yes, we had a 6-foot rule. Yes, it was an inconvenience sometimes. Personally, I was kind of glad about 6-foot rule because if you've ever been inside of a store, some people don't believe this little thing called personal space. I'm telling you, they'd be right up on you and you have to sit there and say, please back up and give me 50 feet. But at the same time, yes, the man did his best for what he could do. And I thought he did an exceptional job. But you had folks like Jim Jordan, who's not a doctor, who actually should be in jail because of what happened at Ohio State that involved him. But I digress. And again, you had a single Democrat that's in there and saying, I apologize, doctor, that you're going through this. Because unfortunately, the House of Representatives is ran by the GOP, and they can call as many of these committees as they want to because they have nothing better to do because they're basically getting paid for doing nothing. But they want to point out the fact that, oh, well, he said 6-foot rule, it didn't really do anything. Masks didn't really do anything. And I'm sitting there scratching my head like, and they say education is the first thing to go. Look what you get. So I feel bad for Dr. Fauci. But again, what do we expect from GOP? And I say it all the time on the show, and I've yet to be corrected. Tell me something that this Congress has done that actually has helped the American people from the GOP side, and I'll say you're full of shit because you won't find anything. They haven't done anything. They've had committees. They tried to go after the FBI. They tried to go after the DOJ. Pretty much anybody that went after Trump, they tried to go after themselves because these are all people who are scrambling to be in the VP sweepstakes for now convicted former president Donald Dorito Trump. Convicted former president. That's going to be an interesting ring to it. Anyway, that's pretty much what we got for that. But moving right along, guys, this story kills me that we are still dealing with Israel, Israel and Palestinians and Hamas, and Israel is pretty much still bombing. Keep in mind, Israel being the so-called victims of this are still moving forward with attacks in the Gaza region. And Biden is telling that, well, Netanyahu, who's still the Israeli prime minister, is saying that he's dragging this out because, well, that's the only way he can stay in power. I find this very interesting. The simple fact of the matter is this is the same President Biden who turned around and sat there and said, I have a peace plan for a ceasefire. I have a ceasefire between Israel and Palestinians. Okay. However, Israel didn't agree to it. And now you're trying to say that Netanyahu is going rogue. I have said it once. I have said it again. If you want to stop Netanyahu and Israel are still receiving U.S. support. Here's just a wonderful idea. Pull it. Pull the financials, pull the American support, pull the American bases from Israel, and they will fold like a lawn chair in the Middle East. That's the part I'm not understanding. Why is it that at this point that President Biden hasn't just sat there and said, you know what? Let's just pull support. Israel, if you want to keep attacking Palestinians, if you still want to keep attacking Gaza, you're on your own. That's what it should be. Because Netanyahu will fold without U.S. support, and yet I have to ask this all the time. What is the dirt that Israel has on us that they're still getting support from us? Billions of dollars in federal aid along with military support. I still have to ask that question because outside of that, I got nothing. Outside of the fact that Netanyahu is truly the welfare queen that is honestly reaping the rewards of American support. But the way Biden tells it, Netanyahu acts more like a stubborn child that doesn't listen outside of an actual leading man of his own country. But I digress. But speaking of President Biden, who I have to say this because, he did have a coy smile when he sat there and said, what do you think about Donald Trump and his 34 convictions? Smile a little bit because he wanted to sit there and say what he third was saying, but he was like, oh, the American system prevailed. Okay, fine. And then what are we doing about the immigration border problem that seems to be bothering all Americans? Yeah, well, as much as I like to say Biden should have really took the victory lap on this, he's going to be taking an L on this one.
Order tightening restrictions on the southern border, potentially shutting it down overnight, has reverberated across the country. But it's also causing confusion on the border itself. We're headed to the U.S.-Mexico border now, where the impact of the president's action limiting asylum seekers is likely to be felt first. Our correspondents are covering all the sides of this issue. ABC's Maria Villarreal is in El Paso, Texas, and our Matt Rivers is in Mexico City. Maria, let's start with you. How would this new action affect border towns that are struggling with an influx of migrants?
Lindsay, that's a really good question. I mean, as you can see behind me, there's a lot of people walking across the border right now to go into Mexico. Just to make it very clear, I mean, when we hear that the border is quote unquote closing or being shut down, that doesn't mean that it's going to affect trade and travel. I mean, that is huge for communities like El Paso. What this will do is have a direct impact on asylum requests that come along these types of communities. We have spoken with nonprofit organizations. They're in a wait and see holding pattern. A lot of that has to do with the anticipation of a possible lawsuit that could be filed by the ACLU. For them, it is going to be business as usual, trying to respond to immigration the way they have been on a daily basis.
And Matt, I want to bring you in here. We know organized crime plays a big role in bringing people to the border. And what will today's order mean for those operations?
Well, what we know is that organized crime wants to make money. They look at humans as commodities, and the last couple of years, frankly speaking, have been very good for them when it comes to the amount of people arriving to the border, the amount of people they're facilitating getting to the border. And we know that firsthand because we speak to cartel members firsthand about this. I want to play you a soundbite with a cartel member who's in the smuggling business that I spoke to just a couple of weeks ago about this very topic.
No importa, presidente, aquí es un buen hotel. Simplemente está ahí.
Porque ustedes están aquí ganando dinero, ¿no?
Pues sí.
Y ustedes están ganando más dinero que nunca entre este mundo con los migrantes.
Pues sí, porque como la mayoría no invierte casi, pues. El dinero solo se da a la vuelta, o sea, multiplica. Porque no invierte, ¿no? Es como en la droga que pierdes y toda la inversión tienes que volver a agarrar lo mismo. Ahí sí son pérdidas. Aquí no.
And so it's crude. He's basically talking about people there as commodities. He's saying as opposed to drugs, which you have to invest in, which you have to move, which you then have to deliver in the United States. When it comes to migrants, there's a scene talks about gets captured by the authorities. If some of these migrants get caught, they don't exactly provide refunds for their services. So it is an incredibly lucrative business, which goes to my original point here. They're making more money than ever. And no matter what executive order come down, they're going to keep trying to make that money.
Of course. And Maria, you've talked with so many migrants making that crossing over the years. Do you expect today's action to change anything that they're doing?
You know, I think that's probably a good question to ask a lot of those people that do come across the border. You know, listen, I think a lot of them will say that they are coming here because they were told that this is the right moment. I mean, they're not obviously following the news day to day of what the president does. But I will say, to Matt's point, you know, these cartels, these smuggling organizations, they do follow this. And when you see chaos created, when you see dissension between both sides, red and blue, I mean, that creates an opportunity for them to capitalize and tell these migrant families now is the time to come, because if you're not careful, the border will be shut down later on. The bigger concern a lot of nonprofit organizations have told us that they are worried about and they are watching out for is the exception that we've seen in this executive action, which is the ability for people to, or the families to send their children here because they know unaccompanied minors will be taken care of and they are part of this exception. We obviously saw this happen 4 or 5 years ago during the Trump administration. We saw a large influx of young children coming to the border by themselves, being sent across the border by smugglers alone. So they are worried that that may happen during this point. But again, it's a wait and see situation depending on if and when that lawsuit is filed.
And so we're talking about tech.
So let's think about this for a second here. Biden had a wonderful chance to turn around and finally fix what I think, outside of the VA problem, is the immigration system. The immigration system in the U.S. has been broken. And yet, Fox News and Friends and the GOP have made such a big deal about immigrants coming across the border, you know, taking jobs that apparently people care about but won't take, because trust me, those immigrants do find jobs. And again, we could have solved this problem decades ago. All it took was, instead of an influx of the National Guard and border police, was an influx of immigration judges, staff, personnel to really help speed up the immigration process. What they basically needed was the same thing that the Department of Defense gets, basically a blank check, because that's all it takes. We could easily fix our immigration system. We really could. At the same time, we could follow what other countries have done with their immigration systems and be fine. But as long as something is broken, they'll complain about it. And it gives the GOP all the nightmare fuel they've ever asked for. These immigrants are going to come over. They're going to take your jobs. They may take your women. They may be murderers. They may be all of these things. And then they may be none of those things. Because we see what happened in Florida when Ron DeSantis sat there and said, well, if immigrants are working for your company, they will get deported, and that said company will get fined $100,000. Do you see how quickly all the immigrants left? Do you see how many job sites became graveyards? Did you see how many vineyards and things of that nature were empty, and that those vineyard owners were scrambling to find people for the crop before the crops got bad? So it is beyond the pale to sit there and think that America does not need immigrants to work those jobs. But it's interesting to me how they still sit there and they still have this fear tactic. Well, all you got to do is solve the immigration problem. Biden could do it if he chose to. But Biden, instead of being progressive, he went moderate. I keep saying this all the time. Moderate Democrats are Republican light. They'll sit there and say, well, we do have a border problem. Yes, we do, because the system's broken. Not because the fact that Governor Greg Abbott basically turned Texas into his own little kingdom, no different than Ron DeSantis did in Florida. But it amazes me so that Biden didn't sit there and say, I think it's time we fix our immigration system. All he had to do was say it. I mean, he had no problem saying that we had to defend Israel. He had no problem saying we had to defend Ukraine. He had no problem saying anything else. But when it came to the fact of just saying, I think we need to solve our immigration problem, crickets. But again, this isn't the first time that Biden has went progressive, walked it back, and actually did what he really wanted to do, was be conservative. But will this hurt him? Will this hurt him going forward? Yeah. Progressives, Latinx support, immigrants, families of those immigrants that are either naturalized, that are either green card holding citizens or their children who are naturally born here in the U.S. Yes, that's going to affect it. That's going to affect him. Will Donald Trump take advantage of that? No, because he's too busy. He's too busy dissing immigrants. Although I have seen the Latinos for Trump and blacks for Trump, and let's be honest, those are cash grabs. But those numbers are getting bigger. So again, Biden had a wonderful chance to pick up and run with something and chose not to. But hey, it's a long way before we get to November, but we shall see. Move right along, guys. I love this story because, again, book banning should never be a thing. However, unfortunately, in my home state of Tennessee, progressively backwards, and other red states, they are basically doing banned books because, again, they swear up and down they're not for children. Keep in mind, the banned books are usually from people of color and those in the LGBTQ plus community. But apparently, Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul and The Purpose-Driven Life seem to be fine in schools. And I've always said it like this. If you want to ban books that are going to be potentially harmful to children and they're in a library, start with the Bible and work your way down. Some states that are actually finally doing the right thing, which is basically for every time they're trying to do a restriction on book banning, they're stopping it. They're pretty much saying you have to provide an actual dissertation on why this book can be banned. It's not just an automatic rubber stamping. And some states are starting to do this. Maryland, Virginia, Vermont are just a few of the states that are saying, look, if you're going to ban something, you have to provide actual documentation. And of course, companies, and of course, you have these Moms for Liberty and other stupid groups who are trying their hardest to ban books. And thankfully, there are some states, again, like I said, Minnesota, Virginia, Vermont, just to know a handful of those, who are actually doing the right thing. And in doing so, saying, no, if you're going to restrict it, you have to prove it. You just can't rubber stamp it. And of course, those on the right side. Well, I don't want my child reading this book. Well, it's very simple. You don't have to. It's just like abortion. I don't believe in abortion. Okay, you don't have to get one, but you can't force everybody to live the life the way you want to. That would be stupid. But again, Roe versus Wade did get struck down, and a lot of people think that's a great thing. But a lot of people aren't women, and women again are going to be the most pissed off group of voters come this election, and I cannot blame them. But here's the other reason why book banning should not happen, because you would think this story that I'm about to say has not been the only time the story has came up on this podcast. But again, it always seems to amaze me whenever education gets threatened. We see stories like this. A teacher in Boston, a fifth grade teacher in the Boston area, held a mock slave auction and used racial epithets during instruction. A fifth grade teacher at an elementary school held a mock slave auction and even used the N-word as a sort of a restructuring, or what they call them, reenactment. Yeah, reenactment is the word. Think about what I just said for a second here, guys. I just sat there and told you that this is coming from a time when critical race theory was such a scary thing that a lot of people didn't realize that unless you're in law school, you're not going to be taking that course. Those very same schools, mostly in southern states, banned CRT for no other reason outside of fear. Yet in Boston, come for the Celtics, stay for the racism. A fifth grade teacher decided to use the black students in her classroom for a mock slave auction. That's not the crazy part, though. The crazy part is that teacher right now is on administrative leave and going through training while the school superintendent figures out what can be done about this. Let me go. Hang on. Let me get this straight. Let me understand this. You're sitting there telling me that this teacher had a mock slave auction using the black students in her class using the N-word as if she is one herself, is now on administrative leave, but getting additional training while the superintendent tries to figure out the next steps. I think she shouldn't be teaching kids. If you think it's okay to do a mock slave auction with fifth graders, I want you nowhere near children. I want to treat you the same way Law and Order SVU treats its predators. Label you as one and keep you far away from a school or playground. Why? You are a danger to kids. And yet, and again, the reason why I say this and why I think this person may also be white is that she still has a job. Because I can't imagine a black person deciding to have a freaking auction, slave auction, mind you, to prove what? That we needed that, again, number one, educators, which I love to death. Some people are not meant to be educators. And in that case, that person that made that decision should no longer be one. Find another profession in life, but don't do it. But definitely don't be around kids. Because if I was the parent of one of them black children and my child came back and told me that they were part of a slave auction, I couldn't dial the numbers to lawyers fast enough to sue that school, the state, everybody involved that got that person hired. I would be suing. Because what are we showing the next generation? That it is okay for them to tell history as they see fit and not have any cultural sensitivity. But I want to follow that. But I'm going to follow that story because I want to see what Boston does. Because the one thing I know about Boston, outside of the fact that Celtics, is that they're a bunch of Celtics fans, there is a history of racism there. It really and truly is. But speaking of things that don't make any sense, the Fearless Fund. A Fearless Fund to where the two founders you see right there, Ariane Simone and Ayanna Parsons, please forgive me if I mispronounce your names. They are the co-founders of the Fearless Fund. What does the Fearless Fund do for all those that don't know? It is a fund. It is a grant giving organization exclusively to Black women entrepreneurs. Now, let me think about that for a second. It's Black women entrepreneurs that benefit from this, that get a grant to start their own businesses and hopefully become very profitable. Nothing wrong with that, right? We talked about this a few months ago to where certain mayo and napkins found out about this and actually did a lawsuit with the government over them and said, hey, they can't do that. It's considered racist. Yes, you heard me. That because they only give to Black women who are entrepreneurs, that's considered racist according to the provisions of Title 42. I cannot. And again, if you want to know the person who did this, Edward Blum, please Google him when you get a chance, because his group of American Alliance for Equal Rights, which is basically bullshit, are pretty much saying that the Fearless Fund is only for Black women. Again, and saying that, well, they can't do that. And they got the court to agree with them. It is amazing to me that so what if the criteria is only for Black women who want to be in business. Good for them. If they have the ability to do it, it's not racist to me. Racist would be, here's my understanding of it all. Racist would be if you are not fitting the criteria to get that grant, that's not racist. You simply don't fit the qualifications. They tell us all the time when we were going for certain jobs. I know I can't be the only one. Certain jobs that we knew we were qualified for, what did y'all usually get? You're overqualified. We just think that, you'll be a better fit somewhere else. Then they gave you all the bullshit because either they weren't hiring or they already had the person anyway and had to put on a show. But with the Fearless Fund, so what if they gave to only Black women who wanted to be business owners? I think that's a great thing because in certain circles like mine, we've always sat there and said, you're not going to get help from everybody else. Sometimes you got to build a table. You got to build your own table and bring and guide everybody there to make their own plate. There's enough food for everybody. You just got to make your own plate, as a lot of us have said. And yet, a white person of a group sees this and says, "Well, no, we just don't think that you can just be exclusive." Okay, so not for nothing, but you are the group that did benefit from black people. Your people benefited from black people for almost 400 years. You guys literally had a 400-year head start. And now you have the unmitigated gall to turn around there and say, we can't do the same thing. Although we're not doing it off your backs, as your ancestors did ours. But it is amazing to me that they still got the ruling. Now the people for when they are appealing it, but it is amazing that because their exclusivity is to black women. And it's amazing this is not being talked about more. That there really should be a lot more on this than anything else. Because there are groups out there, just like the Fearless Fund, who are exclusive to minorities. And it's not racist to be exclusive, because I'll tell you why. Every other ethnic group helps their own out there, and nobody bats an eye. You've seen it. You've seen their businesses. You've seen the organizations, and they all help each other. But yet, one group decides they want to help black women, and white men see it's a problem. And yet, at the same time, minding their own business does not seem to be in their vocabulary either. But we'll follow that story as it goes along. But another story I did want to get to, guys, because this sounds like straight out of a movie. Imagine you're a juror and that you got a call. The call was that a bag of money was placed at your residence, and that if you simply win a certain way, you would continue to receive bags of money. So you decided to do the right thing and turn it in, right? And report it. And thinking everything is fine. Well, in this case, that juror got dismissed.
Prosecutor called the stuff that happens in mob movies as a Minneapolis jury heads into deliberations without two jurors after someone allegedly tried to bribe one and a second juror was asked about it by her family. Photos from a search warrant filed by the FBI showing a big bag decorated with butterflies on the outside and $120,000 cash on the inside. According to the warrant, a woman showed up at the doorstep of Juror 52 on Sunday night with a bag, handing it to the juror's relative, saying it was a present for the juror, referencing her first name. The woman told the relative to tell Juror 52 to say not guilty tomorrow, and there would be more of that present. Juror 52 immediately called 911 to report the incident. Police finding $100, $50, and $20 bills.
Does this come off as a blatant attempt to tamper with the jury?
When we have someone interfering with the jury process, that is supposed to be sacrosanct. That is supposed to be something that is not touched throughout the trial. And this is really an interference into that.
In court, the defense attorney telling the judge the bag of cash is a, quote, troubling and upsetting accusation. A wild development after the 7-week-long trial over the alleged theft of COVID funds, the first of a chain of expected trials, and now a possible new crime under investigation.
Maura is joining us now.
So let's think about this for a second. Because here's my thing. You're a juror. Somebody finds out that you're a juror. Somebody has delivered money, said that, hey, as long as you vote not guilty tomorrow, you'll get more. You find yourself doing the right thing and reporting it and saying, hey, I don't want this to come back on me. Here's the money. I know in this day and age where money is tight, for a lot of people, President Company included, it is tempting as hell. It is. Let's think about that. It's tempting as hell that if someone sat there and said, hey, man, as long as you vote not guilty tomorrow, you'll get another bag of $120K just like this. It'd be $120,000 is $120,000 you didn't have. It's a little difficult to maintain your integrity. But hey, the juror did it. But here's the problem I would have. Not with the juror being dismissed, because, unfortunately, that's just safeguarding the integrity of the court. I get it. I understand it. But what the one question nobody is asking is, how did that person, because juror information is not readily available to anyone except the courts. And yet someone has figured out that, hey, this person's on the jury and another person. So instead of, coming down the person for reporting $120K and a bag showed up at their house, I'd be looking to see if you got any leaks to the courthouse. Because again, it's a little hard to sit there. And again, I'm just being honest. It is difficult as hell to turn down that amount of money. Like I said, especially in this day and age where money is already tight. But again, there's some leaks somewhere because, had that juror not been of moral fiber, they might have done that and said nothing and nobody might have blinked an eye. That's all I'm saying. But the last one that we got, guys, again, is going to unfortunately deal with that bad-built, butch, blonde, busted Barbie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, again, in all her craziness, and I keep thinking this helper is trying to outdo herself on a daily basis. Well, she turned around and accused of worshiping Donald Trump, said the most vile thing that you can actually say, invoking a dead man.
Congressional Black Caucus is going after Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene over comments she made accusing Democrats of worshiping George Floyd, the Black man who was killed by a Minneapolis police officer in 2020. His death sparked the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, of course. Let's listen to what MTG said that fueled the backlash.
We have Jamie Raskin in there accusing us of worshiping Trump, worshiping as a convicted felon. Well, yeah, so is George Floyd and everybody, and you all too. The media worship George Floyd. Democrats worship George Floyd. There were riots burning down the country over George Floyd, and Raskin is in there saying we worship him. Excuse me, let me correct you, and this is really important. I don't worship, I worship God.
The Congressional Black Caucus responded on X, writing, "This is unhinged even for Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Her actions are unacceptable, even by the lowest of Republican standards. George Floyd did not deserve to die, and a member of Congress should have the decency to acknowledge his humanity."
Greene's comments were made to reporters on Monday after the House subcommittee hearing on the origins of COVID-19.
So it's crazy, isn't it? That, it should be a fairly easy thing to do. We all know the story of George Floyd. We all know the story and how it led to a lot of open wounds and discussions and possible, like the George Floyd Police Reform Bill and the Voting Rights Act. They were all part of that. And of course, thanks to, America's Uncle Tom, Tim Scott, killed it. But I'm not shocked anymore by what Marjorie Taylor Greene says, because she's not acting. That's what she really believes. She could care less about invoking. She and the rest of the GOP worship Trump because Trump has the votes. Trump has sway. As long as Trump has juice, the GOP will do his bidding. Marjorie Taylor Greene, basically, I gotta find better ways to say stuff. Marjorie Taylor Greene basically rode on Doritos' back the entire way up, and still is. But I always say it best: racist and those who are bigots, they will react to everything except being called racist and bigots. At the same time, Marjorie Taylor Greene is both of those. And to be taught and to point out the fact of, they say we all worship Trump. Yeah, you do. Call spade a spade. You do. You repeat everything that man says. You'll sit there just like today. You defended him and his 34 convictions of guilty. His 34 convictions of guilty, and you said that the American people did not agree to this. What you really meant to say is you didn't agree to this. So, but again, invoking a dead man, invoking the dead, not your best work. But again, I implore the people of Georgia, I implore you guys have the ability to make sure that we never hear from this badly built, butch, blonde, busted can of biscuits ass Barbie. You guys can make sure that her representative ass stays there. But please, do us all a favor. That's all I'm asking. But Again, guys, we're going to go and move on to our feel-good segment because usually how the Frack We Got Here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, sometimes make use of faith in humanity, but hey, today is Wednesday, which is hump day. Tomorrow is Thursday, which is Friday Eve for a lot of us, and we want to send you guys out some good vibrations, and hopefully I'm doing just that because I want to show the story of a remarkable 17-year-old because at 17, I was just trying to basically be on the sticks on video games and get through high school, while this 17-year-old will graduate with much, much more.
It's that time of year when many 17-year-olds are getting ready for junior prom and planning their senior year in high school. But instead, 17-year-old Dorothy Jean Tillman is celebrating becoming the youngest person ever to earn a doctorate from Arizona State. Now, this is just the latest of her impressive accomplishments, including earning her associate's degree at age 10, her bachelor's at 13, and her master's at 15. And Dorothy is joining us now for more on this. Dorothy, we're all feeling like slackers now this morning, so thanks for that.
Definitely don't feel like slackers. I'm sure you guys did something today for you.
So let's talk about this. At age 17, you are now the youngest person ever to earn a doctorate degree from Arizona State. Has that sunk in yet? How does it feel?
Honestly, the more like interviews I do and the more I talk to people about it, the more it like sinks in and is kind of crazy. Like I really did this, but I just think being young right now, there's so much like to think about that I'm just like, wow, like the world is my oyster. Like what my life is right now is crazy in general.
And you earned all of that, to be clear. But how did you start down this path of getting these degrees so young, and what motivated you to keep going?
Well, I was often in gifted kids schools or Montessori style schools when I was younger. And when one of those schools got reabsorbed into a bigger school that I just didn't feel like I got that same education that I was craving, my mom started doing the dual enrollment basically with middle school and high school, where we would make sure I had all of those course hours like finished up in all of the gifted kids schools. And those were tangible hours that I could send to other schools so that I could do my high school programming online afterwards. And she could just take me out and we could move on to the college, because that was kind of her goal, knowing that education was taught differently on that higher level. And then that's kind of what we did, you know, our teamwork every day, waking up super early and late hours afterwards, like just kind of all culminated into this.
So what's your advice to others who might have a big goal in mind, but they feel they're too young to achieve it or maybe too old to go for it?
Well, I feel like the best thing for people to remember is that life is always like going. And if you stop learning, that's when your life actually ends. And so feeling too old to do something is definitely not true. If you aren't still learning and growing and taking on new things in your old age, your life stops having like that light, that color, and that joy. And I feel like that'll really like get you out there more than you may have been in many years. And if you feel like you're too young, then you're crazy, because the world is your oyster. There's so much time and you can fail over and over again, but you're learning, and that's like what's important. But doing things, there's no specific like age or time. It's just about being prepared, making sure you have everything together.
And now you're paying it all forward with your own organization to support Black youth interested in STEM and the arts. Tell me more about that.
Yes, the Dorothy Jean STEAM Leadership Institute. So STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math. And growing up, my mom wanting to get me out there socially, I was in a lot of arts programs and I was in a lot of STEM programs, but never both combined. And I always felt like something was missing. Either I wanted that analytical organization in the creativity programs, or I wanted that creativity in the STEM programs. And so I just wanted to combine those after she took me on a work trip with her to South Africa. And I met some girls who shared that same like sentiment about those things not being combined, not having that bridge between right brain and left brain. And so when COVID came, I decided that I wanted to start my camp. And though I couldn't go down there with them, I would create kits and we would do it together online.
All right, so awesome. Dorothy, it's so great having you on. Huge congratulations to you, and we're excited to see what you do next.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's delightful talking to you.
So again, that's great. I mean, 17 years old. Jesus. She has earned 3 degrees, associates, bachelor's, and master's. And again, about to get her doctorate at 17. I'm sorry. I feel lazy. I have a master's degree and I feel lazy. It took me 41 years to get the master's, and God, she did it in a quarter of the time. But anyway, congratulations to her. But thank you for making me feel old. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know it's live. I certainly appreciate it. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. Of course, you can usually find me, Black_Spartan615 on the socials. Like and follow me there. I usually do a lot of things, especially not just reporting the news and not just podcasting, things like that. But I'm a friendly guy. Come and talk to me. We always usually do. Also, I do want to talk about BlurStation.com. Right now, guys, there is a thing that's going out. If you do follow myself and my other compadres about BlurStation, hashtag BlurStation Beta. We are showing tidbits, if you will, of BlurStation and what you can expect. What is BlurStation? I keep telling you guys, it is the vehicle that we've always wanted. It's the table that we built for all media content, not just movies, television, game shows, anime. It's music. I can keep going down the line about BlurStation.com, but definitely check it out. Check out my socials. Again, my other friends out there, Room Full of Blurs, Chris Fury, Tafari TV, Mayhem Media, Geek by Heart, Navy Montel, because we all have put out clips out there that show just tidbits. Oh, and Hellspawn Cosplay as well. That man needs no introduction, but still check him out as well, as we do show bits of the BlurStation Beta and what you can expect. But again, you yourself can go to BlurStation.com. The only thing we do ask that you get the Join Now button. And in my personal case, if you guys wouldn't mind, go to the Blurred's Eye View Affinity membership. You can select my name there, Black Spartan. I would certainly appreciate that as a Affinity member. And again, it's $10.99 a month. $10.99 a month to view Blurred Station. $10.99 a month. I'm just saying it's a lot better than Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, because let's be honest, their prices are going up. Their content doesn't always stay. But definitely check out BlurStation.com. Again, guys, I cannot stress that enough. That is the vehicle that you really need to get on. Also, if you are a content creator and want to have your stuff shown on BlurStation, you do have to join BlurStation.com first. That allows you to actually speak to the people behind the curtain. And if all works out well, then your content can be there as well. The thing about this is you own the content. They just want a little bit of distribution, which again is not a bad idea after all. But outside of that, guys, link at the bottom. I'll make that a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, take my link to the YouTube and Facebook groups for all my podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and of course, all of his podcasts. Definitely follow Get Bit this Friday at 7 p.m. because, well, if you're a gamer, that's when the summer of games starts. And it's bound to be a lot that we're going to try to catch up with. And hopefully we'll have news for, because it happens on the same day as our podcast. But we'll try to make it work. But like, share, follow. Again, guys, it costs $0 to do and takes a second to do, and we simply cannot do that without you. I can't stress enough, guys, that this election season, there's no more sitting on the sidelines anymore. And again, voting is crucial. If voting wasn't crucial, they wouldn't be trying to do everything they can to make sure that you don't vote. Get to know your candidates. I'm not just talking the two old grumpy men. I'm talking to candidates in your area as well, because you want to make sure that the people you have in your city and state are in your best interest. Don't be like Tennessee, where we have a few good people and almost everybody else is an idiot. Again, grill them, get to know them. And again, if you yourself want to run, there's plenty of sites out there that can show you how to actually to get on the ballot on how to run and actually get elected to whether or not you want to work for the city, the state, in a state capacity or a federal capacity. Because trust me, that's how Marjorie Taylor Greene got there. I still want to know who voted that bitch in. Anyway, it's supposed to be positive. But for this election season, guys, be involved. Be involved. Talk about it. Be about it. Just can't sit on the sidelines anymore. But the last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, guys, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information on how to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better as a society when we're progressive. We move forward. We try to right our wrongs by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Congress, electing our first Black woman as a National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up but our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still same old gang in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. And I promise we'll get through this. Peace.